Well, hey, it's 6:30.
I can go ahead and get started with my spiel, and then we can go ahead and start, and I'll just add more people if they join in. All right. So good evening and welcome to tonight's live virtual program from the Howell Carnegie District Library. I'm Amber from the Reference Adult Services Department. Thank you for joining us tonight. I have a few housekeeping items to share before we start the presentation. Tonight's program is scheduled to run until 8 p.m. During the program, all attendees will be muted, so please share any questions for the presenter or report any technical issues you may have in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the program and will assist with any technical issues that may come up. After the presentation and maybe throughout it, we can address as many audience questions as we can before the program ends. This program also will be recorded, and the recording will be available on the library's YouTube channel soon after this live virtual program. It takes about a week, and I'll post a link to our channel in a little bit. If you don't want your video in the recording, just make sure to keep your video off, which will, there'll be a red slash to the camera icon in the bottom left corner of your Zoom window. And don't forget to visit our website, www.howelllibrary.org, to discover more upcoming events from the Howell Carnegie District Library. Tonight we have Gleaners Bridget Brown speaking on Mission Nutrition Livingston. Bridget has been with Gleaners in various roles for over 8 years. She's currently serving as the Director of Food Secure Livingston, focused on understanding and filling the food needs and gaps across the Livingston County. And she is serving as co-chair of the Livingston County Hunger Council. Without further ado, I'll let Bridget take it away.
Thank you so much. Really looking forward to giving this presentation and sharing what we've been doing in Livingston County with the folks on this call and that might listen to the recording later. I thought I would break this up into kind of two sections. I do want to talk about Mission Nutrition Livingston, but I think a good preface and getting into that detail really is around our COVID work since March and what that means for families in Livingston County, but also more specifically our children. So I love having questions, so please use that comment section as much as you'd like. I can address them, or maybe we can have someone unmuted to ask additional questions. And then I'd love to have a conversation at the end as well, learn what you all have to say, and hear general feedback. Have you been to a food program? Have you volunteered with us? Is there something that we're missing in the community that we can do a better job with? So I will now share my screen here for the presentation and we'll get started. Oh, let's see here. Let me try this again. It's not actually, we just tested this and it's not actually coming up for some reason.
So if you press the share screen option at the bottom, does any options come up for you?
They do, but not the one I'm looking for. And we just did this. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it wouldn't show what I have. Here, let me see if that shows me more. Ah, yes, here we go. Sorry about that. Technology, it's a blessing and a curse, right? Okay, so I just want to give a background on what Gleaners is and kind of what we're focused on in the community first as well. So we are the local food bank. Basically, if you think of us as, you can think of us as like the Costco of food pantries, and our work really is around making sure that people have the right foods that they need when they need it. In most recent years, we're really trying to make sure that it's not just having food, but it's having nutritious food and other resources such as nutrition education that can help people kind of advance their life and hopefully meet self-sufficiency so that they can give back to their community and be a positive influence. And that's what we really enjoy doing. That's what we focused on. And in Livingston County specifically, we hope that we've been able to do a lot of that, but it takes a village, right? So here I have listed many of our partner agencies. So I thought, we would not be able to do what we do without the people on this page. We serve food to over 25 different agencies locally. That's all across Livingston County. You can see many of them are listed here. We're a proud member of the Livingston County Hunger Council. That is essentially a group that is focused on solving food insecurity across the community, and really focusing on their own neighborhoods even to ensure that people don't go hungry, right? So as you see, we have emergency food pantries and fresh markets. Here are some pictures of what we've been able to do at our shared harvest pantry, which is actually here in Howell. As you can see, you may have thought many years ago, food banks, really, they give away boxes of food, but we are committed to providing the best food that we possibly can for not only us, but across all of these agencies. So you see beautiful eggs, you see grapes, peppers, watermelon. This was part of our Fresh Market initiative lately, but it all started a couple of years ago when we said, our families, they don't just want canned goods, and we knew that, but we started to say, okay, so what do you want? What do you need? And what will you use that won't go to waste? So we started to spend more of our budget on items like this, which are actually cost effective. And it started to really meet the need in a better and different way. So our client choice pantry does provide, as you can see on the far left, those basics of canned goods, what you might think of what a food bank does. If somebody does a food drive, here are a whole bunch of cans, that kind of thing that we share with people. And that is definitely a huge part of what we like to do. But the client choice model that we're able to provide at Shared Harvest Pantry allows families to choose the food that they take with them. And with that, reduces waste and increases the dignity of each of those families. So again, I mentioned we want to make sure that families have what they need when they need it, but that also elevates to when we're able to do something like this, it says, hey, we care about you, we care what you have to say, and if you know that your family doesn't need something, we really like to share that. Now, this model, I'll go into a little detail in a bit about how this model has changed during COVID, but this is really what we strive to make happen. The fresh market piece, this is now an opportunity that we actually started in Livingston County, which we're quite proud of, my team. We're a very small team, but I'll say mighty, has really focused on, okay, so the canned goods, those sorts of things tend to be higher cost. And in order to manage that budget and manage people's visitations, we have to limit how many times they can come and visit us every year. What does it mean when we offer an opportunity more frequently and have more variety of specifically those more inexpensive items on that basis? So we've actually started Fresh Market at Shared Harvest Pantry last year, just over a year ago, where we invited families to come on Thursday nights without an appointment to get fresh fruits and vegetables. And, it started slow. I think we had 5 families the first week. And right before COVID, we had over 90 families in attendance. As you can imagine, we were not sure how to handle that when COVID actually happened, but we're back up and running in a drive-through model. But having families come either weekly or however often they needed to visit us really kind of changed our understanding to an extent of what actually meets the need of the people in Livingston County. So we'll get into this a little bit with Mission Nutrition Livingston, but we wanted to especially make sure that our children in this community had the right foods that they needed to be successful in school and beyond. So that's where you get all of these fresh fruits and vegetables and the commitment. But a large part of the clients coming from really schools from all across the community. We're pretty proud of what has happened since. We do still have Fresh Market concept going. Now it's a drive-through model, so people can stop in. We've actually expanded it because 90 families is a lot to serve during a 2-hour period of time on a Thursday night. We've actually expanded it to be all day on Wednesday. We do plan to keep that after we finally can reopen up the client choice model pantry, where we kind of shut the canned side of our work down and focus more on the fresh fruits and vegetables. And then anything we have left over is always available for our clients on the following days if we do have things left over. But as you can see, like I said, that variety is so important. And, in particular, in that bottom left corner, you see that fresh milk. That was something that our families had been asking for a while. And just a couple of years ago, we were able to partner with United Dairy Industry of Michigan and establish a solid relationship that said, hey, we're hearing you, and we want to make sure that you have what you need for your family that you might be purchasing. And then hopefully when we provide you food and get you that assistance that you need as quickly as possible, you can focus on those other areas of need that you might have. So that's what all these agencies really focus on. And that's what our job is out here in the community, trying to be sure that not only they can do their job, but we have those options for everyone. So that has been something that's very exciting. And hopefully we will continue with all of these people and be able to continue to learn through this COVID experience what else might be possible. So not only do we work with the idea of that brick and mortar concept, which has changed from the client choice model to really that drive-through model. Mind you, we have a lot of vulnerable clients that come to us, people that have Crohn's disease, or, that final week of Fresh Market that we had right before we temporarily shut down Fresh Market. I had a cancer survivor coming through. She had her last treatment of chemo earlier that day and came to Fresh Market right after. So we know we're really helping people that have some severe issues, and we want to be sure that they get what they need so that they can move forward. And hopefully, especially with nutrition and how important that is for your health, continue to support their work and getting better and moving forward. The pictures I have here are mobile pantries. So something that has been pretty exciting. We work with a lot of different people across the community. I've listed several there below that have helped us get food out during COVID especially. But these mobile distributions are a more unique side of what Gleaners does and may not be known to many people. If you don't need food, you may not know any of this sort of thing happens, but a mobile pantry is essentially where we bring pallets of food out to a specific location. We try our best to find a partner that is in an area of high need, or at least is located close by an area of high need. We bring in volunteers to help us manage what this could look like. And then we have cars come up. They don't have to get out of their car. Now, if they come without transportation, we absolutely still serve them, but they come up, they drive through. Right now, especially, they're just opening up their trunks and we're putting food in. And we have essentially several fully balanced meals that people can get when they come to one of these. So on the left-hand side, you can see that's actually Fowlerville High School. We started that distribution at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So March, this is one of the very first efforts that we did in Livingston County to kind of say, okay, we're here to support. How can we do it? But you can see there's, I think, tuna and chicken in that picture, along with rice and peanut butter. And so we really try to be sure that everybody has kind of that wide array of product available. Also, obviously, to the far left again is that fresh milk, because we know that families, whenever we do a survey, families say we need that milk. And I was fortunate to work several of our mobile distributions this past summer, and that's what I continued to hear. More than anything, families, when they would pull up and we would do a short, like, hey, how many people are in your family sort of intake, they would say, I really need milk. Is that available today? So we actually ensured that milk was on every single distribution that we had. Sometimes we had box milk and fresh milk, but we would guarantee that fresh milk was available for our families. In addition, not only did we make sure that children had access to these mobile pantries, again, I'll get to that in a little bit, but our seniors, that was a really important piece for us too. So our senior distribution, we do have a mobile distribution in Heartland. It's at the old Heartland High School, right up on 59, and pretty much anyone is welcome during that time to come. But we've been doing a mobile distribution there for quite a while. We had been serving 50 families prior to COVID, and we'd actually bring 100 food packages, and we'd split it with Meals on Wheels, who is an absolutely fantastic partner of ours. And since COVID, we've actually increased that distribution to a total of 200. They do share with Meals on Wheels still, but they're providing about 125 to 150 food packages to our seniors. A lot of that is around, their fear of going out to some extent. Also, just needing that food, needing the fresh produce. So again, on the right, you can see the cabbage and the potatoes, and I'm sure there was probably carrots and apples included in that mobile distribution, along with all the canned goods that our families get. And seniors, we do adjust a little bit to meet their diet if possible. So we have, juice that might be not as acidic, or hopefully not acidic, and things that would really help them, and maybe the medications that they're taking so they don't counter anything. We really want our seniors to be able to stay where they are and stay safe, and know that we care about them, because they've been supporting us for a long time, and we need to do the same. So additionally, as you can see below, like I said, we've been fortunate to partner with several more people, or several more organizations over the past several months. Livingston County Catholic Charities has really stepped up and helped us provide actual deliveries. So Gleaners isn't doing food deliveries, but we have some partners that have stepped up to do so, to ensure that those that struggle getting out the door, or might be very severely vulnerable to this virus, that they actually get what they need to. So Livingston County Catholic Charities is really happy to partner with them. We're starting to expand that partnership too, which is pretty exciting. Mill Pond Manor, that's a senior location, a low-income senior location. We started providing just produce to them, and they started requesting more. Again, I think people get this idea of what a food bank maybe used to be, and then learn, oh, okay, so we actually ebb and flow with what people want. And if they tell us there's a specific item that they're looking for, maybe we can search and see, can we get a better deal on that? Sometimes food distributors or wholesalers, whatever it might be, they actually donate too. So we might buy a pallet, but then they donate a pallet. Or in the case of United Dairy Industry of Michigan, they're extremely generous. So they provide truckloads of milk every single month with their large contribution to us. Same with produce. We have a lot of farmers that donate, in addition to those that, just bring in and wash the produce and get it back out. So we're pretty fortunate across the board. At the start of the pandemic, we wanted to make sure that people that were already visiting for additional services at DHHS or at Veteran Services also had the food boxes or food available. Sometimes it's hard to say, okay, I need this, I have this need, and this organization can help me here, but I also have this need, and so I need to go over here too. And all of a sudden you get 5 or 6 different things, and that can be really overwhelming, especially if there's an intake process at every single one. And and, you know, compounded by just what's happening in everyone's everyday life. So we wanted to make sure if people did a stop in, that if they needed food, they could be asked if that was part of it, and then provided a food box immediately. So I'm really thankful for those relationships. And I hope that, you know, we continue on as people, as people start to maybe lose some of the benefits that they've had over this course of time. We did, you know, there is a migrant farm in Gregory, and we were fortunate to partner with them and make sure that they had the food that they needed. I do believe that they actually had a small COVID breakout. So it was nice to know that when we provided food, it would keep people safe. And if you ever go to their farm, it's absolutely stunning. I got a full tour from some of the workers, and it was an absolute blast. But that's the kind of thing that we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that the people that were vulnerable, or you know, working really hard out had the food that they were even producing to some extent available to them. And then lastly, you know, our deputy sheriffs, I have to give so much praise to. They were originally bringing some of the fun inmates by that were about to leave. They started packing food for us, and then when the official state order kind of shut that down in fear that COVID would pass through the jails, which is a very real issue, the deputies stepped up and started to come in and actually packed food boxes for us while we kind of figured out what our next steps were and how was it best to serve people. So we were really, really appreciative of what they did. And we even have one deputy still stopping by every once in a while to help with turkey distributions this November with our holiday food going out the door. So very happy to have all of these partnerships. But again, it's all about access. So we have shared harvest pantry, and families are allowed to come to shared harvest 6 times a year. We've really been much more flexible with that during this period of time, but having mobile distributions where it's actually in your neighborhood or somewhere you're more familiar with, maybe trust a bit more, has been a huge help in getting out there, kind of closing that food gap and getting people what they need. Okay, so really wanted to go through who was impacted at the beginning of COVID. We've talked about this. You know, there's tons of articles all over the place, but who was impacted, and then how could Gleaners best respond? So our schools obviously closed. I believe March 16th was the last, or was the first day of the school closure. So our kids, and if they don't have the right food to, they're not going to be as successful. Nutrition is easily tied with education and success, and we needed to step up for that. Our seniors, you know, again, a lot of people are taking medications, or just in order to stay independent, need to be sure that they have the right food. People with disabilities, that's a whole nother group of people that need the right nutrition to keep going, and we need to make sure that we support them in the community. Again, our veterans, and then people that had COVID. That was a huge, you know, we in Livingston County didn't have to deal with that too much, but we were very concerned that if people had COVID, they were actually losing approximately 50 pounds while they were either in the hospital or at home. And that meant they're not getting the nutrition that they need. That can take a long time to build back up. Some of us might find that losing weight is a good thing. I know I would, but at the same time, it's not something that's healthy, right? When you're losing 50 pounds in a month, or even just a couple weeks, that's a huge issue for your body, and making sure that it's regulating and getting the right nutrients to be successful. You might become just lethargic if you're lucky, but there are other issues that can easily come about if you don't have the right foods in your system. So we knew, like, these are the people that are really truly impacted by COVID in the immediate, right? We needed to step up and make sure that they were well taken care of, because we can do it and we should do it. So when we kind of break down in Livingston County, what does that really look like? You know, we don't have tons of veterans that needed our help necessarily, but we did have, you know, those food boxes go out at the veteran services. That's not including those that may have come through the pantry. We do have a lot of veterans that have come through our pantry and thankfully served at some point in time, and we want to make sure that they're helped. So they also fall into that senior category. Our at-risk households, earlier on, we did have a woman that was diagnosed with COVID, and she immediately came from her test over to us. And thank goodness we had the right protocols in place because we wanted to make sure everybody stayed safe. But she had to stay in her car, keep a mask on. She let us know that she had it because, who knows what this could mean. And we were sure, to have our gloves and put the food in the trunk and hopefully provide her the dignity that she needed while also providing the food that she needed so that she could quarantine and stay away from family members and those others that she identified as being possibly at risk with her illness. The migrant workers, like I said, we were doing a monthly distribution and we were essentially listening to what they could use at the farm and providing them that those fresh fruits and vegetables. And we did a mobile right before they left to go back down to Texas as well to make sure that they had what they needed along the way so they wouldn't be exposed on their trip down. Seniors, obviously, again, we care about our seniors quite a bit, and they're always a good portion of the people that we serve on a day-to-day basis. And then our families with children. So before COVID, it was 1 in 14 children that were food insecure. And now it's actually 1 in 6 based on some new Feeding America data that has recently come out. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but that's kind of the breakdown of who did we really serve and why did we serve them in particular. Some of the feedback that we were able to get, this is a beautiful box of produce on your left. We took advantage of the COVID food assistance program over the last couple of months, especially earlier on. The box kind of changed more recently, but we took advantage of what we could. And you can see that beautiful box right there. That's something that would go out to every family on a mobile, which was awesome. We don't usually have that wide variety, but it opened up a lot of doors for us to build relationships with more farmers, really across the whole Feeding America network, and make sure that we can get more things like oranges and cucumbers we tend to have in this area, but oranges and grapes and those sorts of things. Even now, when it's a lot more difficult to get your hands on those kinds of items at a food bank. We actually had pineapple this week, which I was pretty excited about too. So I just thought I'd mention that real quick. But the feedback that we're getting from people, both in the mobile distributions and at the pantries, is that they're getting what they need, which is really, really important. That's the whole point of doing these kinds of programs. You can read this quote on your own, but when you're a family that needs help, it's it's an obviously very stressful situation. It means that being food insecure essentially means that you don't know where your next meal is coming from. And quite frankly, we have a lot of people in Livingston County that do live meal to meal, and we don't talk about it very much, mostly because it's a wealthier community, and I think we do a really good job of serving the people in need. But if people need to come to a food bank to get that help, we also have the ability to make sure that they can get that help. So when we're able to provide the better products, those healthier options, we're taking the stress away, but we're also providing them the nutrients that they need to move forward and work through. Maybe if they have a problem, say with housing or a bill that's going unpaid or something like that, we're giving them the opportunity to handle that and hopefully move on. So going back to that very first slide, where I talked about the dignity provided in a client choice model, that allows families to say, okay, I'm getting what I need. I've chosen these items. This is good for my family. I know, again, we've changed the model a little bit during COVID, but that also says, okay, my food need is taken care of. Now I can pay that bill. Now I can be sure that I have what I need going forward. And when that happens, those other opportunities open up for people. And historically, now I haven't, COVID just has kind of changed everything, but historically, we only have people on average come. Now I'm gonna take out our seniors, but on average, people come only 3 times a year. Most of the time that is during the holidays. So maybe when bills are higher. But if they're only coming 3 times a year, they're allowed up to 6 times a year. That really says that people are coming when they absolutely need it. They're getting what they need and they're able to move forward, which is a really exciting thing for us too. That's what we hope to hear. That's what we hope to learn from the community as a whole. And hopefully, a lot of people, we also see one time and they never come again. I believe it's 30% of those that come once don't have to use the pantry again. So that's a huge, I want to say opportunity, but it's a huge, thing that we're doing for people. If we can step up immediately, it makes the difference in the long term, right? And food is a very inexpensive solution to solving some of these people's problems. So we love what we do. We're happy to do it. I'd love to be out of business, but right now, especially, we're not. When those COVID numbers are increasing and people are losing their jobs. We hear just about every day about someone new losing their jobs that, maybe had gotten a warehouse position or something like that. And just they have to close down, right? So we're here to help pick up those pieces and keep people moving forward and having that hope and making that difference, right? So I'd like to, if we can, take a little break, see if there are any questions, maybe stretch a little bit. I know that was a lot of compacted information in about a half an hour. So do we have any questions? Give it just a minute. Want to make sure there's nothing in the chat. Ooh. I'm on this just about every day, but I still learn quite a bit when it comes to Zoom. Okay. All right. So without further ado, if there are more questions, please do put something in the chat, but I'll keep going. I mentioned Mission Nutrition a couple times, and that's what this tonight is really all about. But I thought giving that preface to this work was very important, as it really affected how we move forward with this particular programming. So Mission Nutrition Livingston, I have to say, I absolutely love this logo. It's something, it took a couple weeks to get. I know that sounds strange, but we obviously have really focused on the food insecure individuals, or really children, students in Livingston County, but we didn't want the stigma to come with it. So we decided we wanted our own logo. This was really a Gleaners and Livingston County Hunger Council led effort. The original program name was School Food Security, School Food Security Committee, which is quite the mouthful, as you can tell. I can barely get it out of my own mouth. So we started going with Mission Nutrition Livingston. And really the hope is that we eliminate the stigma that comes around qualifying or needing that food assistance, because when you have a child that participates in the food programs that they do qualify for, that means that they're getting the right nutrition while they're at school. Gleaners and other agencies can focus on evenings and weekends, and we'll get into that in a minute too. But when they have the right food in school, that means that they have the opportunity to pay attention. My husband is a second grade teacher in the city of Detroit, actually. And, they have full-blown food programs there that everyone takes advantage of because their whole school qualifies for it. But when he has a kid come in hungry, or that maybe hasn't eaten breakfast in the morning, they're not paying attention to their teacher, right? Their head is down, they're tired. They haven't had that opportunity to wake up. And I know I'm groggy in the morning, but when you're supposed to start learning and you don't catch up till halfway through the lesson, that's a pretty big hole for people. So we want to make sure that we get that food in early, and then, just let families know it's really not that big of a deal to be a part of these programs, because you might need the help and it might just be a temporary thing, but let's get you that help earlier on so your kid doesn't suffer academically or behaviorally, which is another issue that a lot of teachers come upon with food insecure children. And then when they get the lunch too, that helps them kind of continue on. But there's so much more that can go into the success of a kid if we invest in food for them, and the right foods, right? We've all seen those commercials where you are what you eat, and all of a sudden there's a kid on the soccer field or something like that that's looking like a French fry, right? And it's a very real thing. I played sports, and I can say that I did not always eat the healthiest, and on those days you feel really down. And sports are definitely not everybody's thing, but they make a difference, and that is just a physical representation of what happens in the classroom when a kid doesn't have the right nutrition too. Along with that, we also, we did surveys and whatnot, and we found out from a lot of parents that they thought that the programs that were available to kids that were in need, they were just kind of very low quality. And the truth is, for Livingston County, the families have really pushed for these programs to be some of the best in the state. Salad bars, veggie bars, things like that, to make sure that kids have that I keep wanting to say motivation, but have that nutrition that they need. And so, going back to this logo, all of those things impact people's thinking of what those programs do and how they help. And so again, we wanted to eliminate this stigma and come around to something. So if you ever see this logo out there, it is Hunger Council initiative, but essentially, everything that we do, yes, it's geared towards kids that are food insecure, but we want it to also feel like, every kid should be eating breakfast. Every kid should be eating lunch. We want to make sure there aren't any skipped meals, because the fewer skipped meals, the more successful you are. And so, we have a lot of nutrition education pieces that now include this. We do have our pieces that share food resources in the community. But anytime that we build a poster or something like that, we wanted to say, this is for everybody. We want everybody to learn about this. Growing up, I did not have I did not have breakfast every morning, despite my parents trying. And I will admit that I was one of those kids, and I didn't have to be one of those kids, but I was one of those kids that would take some time to finally catch up. And in math class, when you're not paying attention to the beginning, you really can't catch on to what's going on at the end. And all of a sudden you get distracted and all that good stuff. So I won't go into more detail on how I could have been a better student, but that's really how this logo came about. And I know that might be boring, but it's an exciting piece for us as we kind of move forward through our work. This is a whole bunch of stats. Really, it was when we started this program, or before we started this program, which was actually in 2018. These are some more recent numbers. We wanted to know, in Livingston, we do care about our kids, and we've preached that for a long time, but is that really where we needed to focus when there are these programs like free breakfast and free lunch for those that qualify and all that stuff? We wanted to better understand, what is really going on, because we didn't want to replicate anything, but we wanted to make sure, if people don't know about certain resources, or if there was a totally different resource that we hadn't thought about that should be in Livingston County, how do we make sure that happens? So that all comes from statistics and gathering data, right? The super, super fun stuff. So this chart, MMG, stands for Map the Meal Gap. So just so you are aware, that is what that means. But I thought you can look at this yourself. I wanted to go through, what do these stats look like today? So you have that great number of, food insecure in Livingston County, or food assistance enrollment, all those sorts of things. But numbers have significantly changed because of COVID. At the time that this was done, half of Livingston's food insecure individuals actually qualified for food assistance. So you see the ALICE wages, those sorts of things. That's a huge number. That means that if you are food insecure, but you make too much money, you don't get the help that you need from the government programs. That's something that we really needed to wake up to, right? I think 98% of the people that did qualify were enrolled because they had touched base with either us or somebody else in the community that said, hey, this isn't a big deal, go for it. At least on the SNAP benefit side. So SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or that bridge card. But if they don't qualify, where are they getting the help, and where are the gaps, and are they actually being exposed to any of the stuff that could help them move forward and really help in the community? So that's half. The numbers included in this, the food insecure number, that doesn't include the ALICE number. So when you add ALICE and food insecurity, 31% of our community is struggling to meet the need. 46% of Livingston's food insecure children do not qualify, or at least the time that we started pulling this data in 2018 originally, did not qualify for those programs. That's, again, distinguishing children versus families. That's a huge, huge number. And again, we through this effort have really been trying to ensure that kids have food in the school first, and then also how do we provide those evening and weekend meals. And so we needed to best understand what this looked like. And if you don't qualify for the school program, we might be able to help a little bit there, but it's a lot harder to get a new school program going. It's a lot easier to provide families food through a mobile or something like that they can then make the food and bring, and save some of that cost. And then hopefully, again, pay attention better, get better grades, all those sorts of things that we're hoping for. So I don't want to go too much more into all of this, except for, I mentioned the ALICE piece. And you see the cost of, what a family of four looks like. That's that hourly rate actually that they need to make. What that really means is if you make over $33,475, you do not qualify for food assistance if you're a family of four. So if you make $35,000, which is not a lot of money, you don't qualify for help. And so again, all of this data really helped us say, okay, we know that we care about kids. Now we know who these, what's going on for these kids. And that there's a huge gap in what we're supplying and how Livingston County can respond to that need. Another quick thing, and you guys may have heard it before, but between this slide being created, well, there was with the ALICE study, when they originally did, I believe is in 2013 was when they started pulling the numbers, and they pulled them again in 2019. There was a $10,000 increase in the cost of living in 5 years. I'm sorry, so that's 2018. The report came out in 2019. In 5 years, though. $10,000. Most people do not get promotions or increased pay, or that 2% raise typically doesn't equal $10,000 in 5 years. So just keeping that in mind, that all matters when we start to build these food programs and say, okay, what makes a difference for our families? Where can we make the difference for our families, and how best to do it? How do we use our resources most efficiently to make all this happen? So this is what we were looking at when we started to say, okay, if we care about kids and that's kind of the direction we're headed in, we really want to better understand what does that mean in each school district specifically. We do care about the young kids too, and often they have siblings. So we hope that if we hit a sibling with a specialty program, we also provide to those younger kids. You can see this breakdown is pretty huge when you start to talk about the different school districts and what it could mean to each of them. F and R is free and reduced. So percentage of students that are free and reduced for each school district. And then for each building, obviously there's different pockets of different communities and that changes. But you can see that in certain areas, such as Heartland, this 16% may not seem huge, but when you take a look at the actual building to building percentages, 6 to 50%, that's huge. And so, I don't mean to pick on Heartland, but that's a really good example of why we're doing what we do. 51% in Brighton, that's huge. 40%, 41%, 27%. This means that we have that gap. And again, if I go back to the previous data, not all the kids that are food insecure actually qualify for food programs. So these numbers really matter. And if you just look at the numbers specifically, this was 2019 when we added these numbers all together. The whole was 5,700 kids. The breakdown you see below. But with COVID, there's been a huge increase, like I said. So in 2018, out of the whole population, or the whole student population, we had 7.2% of students were in need. And that's when we started the Mission Nutrition program, Mission Nutrition Livingston. Right now, because of COVID, people losing their jobs, or, whatever may have happened in their household, now we're at a 16%, 16% for child food insecurity. That's huge. That means that we have a lot of work to do this year. And I'm really thankful to all these school districts because they've been doing an amazing job during this time, making sure that they take advantage of the government programs that are available for their students. The SFSP, which is the Summer Food Service Program, that's something that the state MDE and USDA decided to prolong. We started it early in March, and again, summer, it's not supposed to start really till June. We started it in March, and Gleaners had its own response to that. But over the course of time, with kids going back to school and virtual and, back and forth and everything that's going on, all the craziness right now, having food taken off the plate, especially for the students that are food insecure, their families that are food insecure, that's a huge, huge deal. So I'm pretty excited that each of these school districts took advantage of that opportunity. This effort helped us understand as a social service agency, how do we step up and help them? And it's been a wild, but very cool ride. So I want to just share those pictures at the top. Again, I mentioned the really nice looking food that these school programs have now. And I just want to make sure people know, kids are getting a lot of fresh produce, or at least it's available. Whether or not they take it is a different story. But, a lot of that can be learned in the home or learned through nutrition education, which is a large part of what Mission Nutrition Livingston is attempting to do across the board for all kids, not just food insecure kids. But I just want to say, every school district I visited now during their lunch periods at some time or right before when the schools were preparing them, and it was beautiful. I don't remember having the foods that are available now. And if even some school districts start to talk about, calorie intake and all that fun stuff. So I just want to make sure people know it's not just like that cardboard pizza anymore. There's some real gourmet-esque sort of items available. All right. So, the outside pieces here, That kind of speaks to the current food programs for children that were available. Again, we didn't want to repeat with Mission Nutrition Livingston what others had already done. So we said, all right, let's make sure we're documenting everything that we do as we go forward. So obviously SNAP is an opportunity for those that qualify in Livingston County. That helps their whole family. We want to make sure if they do qualify, they're taking advantage of it to be sure that they get those evening and weekend meals again. But 46% of the food insecure children's families don't qualify. Again, that gets to that piece of, being food insecure, but not quite making little enough that you actually get the help that you might need. National school and breakfast programs kind of is the same sort of thing, but that's where I was talking about free and reduced lunches. The weekend and holiday backpack programs, there are several different schools that have some sort of opportunity for kids, especially the schools that have the higher rates of free and reduced students, but it may not be sufficient. It may just be a couple cans of fruit and some cereal or something like that. And everybody does what they can, right? But are we providing the right foods? Is it making a difference? Are we getting feedback that says, hey, this helped my family or this helped this particular student move forward? We want to better understand what does it mean when we actually implement a program. Again, the summer food service program, Salvation Army of Livingston County is so huge in this area and has been doing such a wonderful job with Summer Lunch Bunch. Their effort is really around reducing that stigma as well and making sure that families have what they need and those food packages, eating lunch, having fun, understanding that just because you're in need doesn't mean that you're lesser than, but equal to, right? And when kids egos are built up in that way, it really makes a difference. It allows them to feel like, hey, I can do this, or my family might be struggling right now, but it's just right now. It's not long term. We can make these things happen. The summer food service program, actually Gleaners took advantage of this past year and became a location to provide food as well. And we did, going back to those mobile pantries, I showed a picture of Fowlerville High School, and the large pallets of product there. But we actually have several different mobile pantries going on right now. And as you can see, kind of in the middle, we started a mobile distribution at Three Fires Elementary, which was the highest rate of free and reduced, had the highest rate of free and reduced children in the community. So we started a mobile pantry with them last November. So it's been a year. And then when COVID occurred, we increased it from 50 families to 100 families and decided to go bi-weekly. And we took advantage of the summer food service program. So the difference for us versus Salvation Army, Salvation Army's was a, hey, here's your meal. So here's your sandwich, or here's your delicious wrap, whatever it might have been, along with the sides that come with it. And here's a take-home food bag. Gleaners decided to do a full mobile where children and their families would get the whole, basically 10 days worth of meals for their student, aimed at their student. So that's kind of what we did. That's extended the Three Fires pilot even more. They're still doing bi-weekly to this day. But when we did that, when we said, hey, here's some groceries to take home, instead of, hey, come here, come to the park, whatever it is, or let's do a quick drive-through. When we gave the family, hey, this whole package, not only did it cut cost for that program, but families also gave us the feedback that it made a difference for their whole family. So it was really built for a child, but it made a difference for their whole family. Their whole family could sit down and eat together, and build camaraderie, and take advantage of this time with COVID and really become closer than maybe they had been in a really long time. And that kind of feedback is huge. aside from that, again, I want to reinforce, it actually cut costs by a third. So it was a huge program. So Gleaners was the first basically to try this kind of concept. It's just taking our normal mobile distributions and trying to use the summer food service program effort. But because of its success and because the surveys that came back as showing how successful this effort was, even in Livingston County or in a more rural community, we're actually taking all of our learnings to USDA directly to say, hey, we should really be considering this long term. We could save money. This is more efficient. It gets families in and out, has them caring about each other more. I mean, it's a huge win. So we are still doing some of those SFSP mobiles, and hopefully long term, that's something positive that came out of COVID. Other locations for the summer food service program or just mobile distributions that we've been doing in Livingston County for specifically our children are, as I mentioned, Three Fires, that's Howell. We had Pinckney Bus Garage. They already had a mobile distribution going for many, many years, but we actually increased their distribution to 125 families provided every other week, and they still have that going as well. We're really proud partners of them. Each of these school districts finds their own volunteers and their own passionate people to help make all this happen. And it's been absolutely wonderful. So those two, I believe I mentioned our Heartland distribution as well. We were doing SFSP through the summer. We temporarily discontinued it as they got rolling with school, just because that's a whole lot of stuff. So we had a brief pause in September and opened back up in October at Venture Church. Thank you, Venture Church, for helping us out. And Howell, Heartland area. And that will be continuing on a monthly basis going forward. And then Fowlerville, which was our largest site, we served through October. We did bi-weekly, and we had our last distribution had 283 food packages given out. Before that, it was 300 food packages given out every other week for months. It was a huge help to that community. It is temporarily discontinued, but we're looking for a new site to host it, because we know that there's some need there. We also know there's some need in the upper Howell area over there too. So we're trying to pull from different areas, make like mega sites to happen. And if mobiles like this are the way to do it and get people better access to food in a more frequent way, especially right now when COVID numbers are going up and all those sorts of things happen, that's what we're shooting for. So happy to answer questions on that if anybody has any, but I'll keep running too. The food pantries in Livingston County. So that was something that was pretty cool. And I apologize, I need to actually update this. We have 3 that are in school food pantries. Farley Hill Elementary in Pinckney, they're an amazing organization. They're focused on providing food for Pinckney families, but especially students that are in need. They do an amazing job down there. Innovation Academy started in Howell just about, I think it was 2 years ago. It was right when we were starting this program up. And we actually worked with them to make sure that they had stock shelves. And since then, many, many other kids have actually used the program, the pantry program. And the idea was actually to eliminate stigma too. So their lunchroom is also kind of the pantry. And what that does is says, if a kid grabs something off the shelf or a snack or something like that, they're not looked down upon, which increases the likelihood that they might take it when they really do need it. And that school has been doing a phenomenal job making it a part of their culture, which is very cool. And we're trying to learn from that, because we'd love to have that sort of program really across our whole network. And then finally, a newer partner of ours is Heartland High School Pantry. They've been operating for 5 years, but through really all of this work right before COVID, we finally connected. We knew about each other, right? But it takes a little bit of time sometimes to build out those partnerships. So right before COVID, we started to help provide them food. And then COVID happened and they shut down and all that good stuff. But now they're actually one of our partners for the Heartland School Pantry that we have going on, helping us identify families that are in need, making sure that their families have have everything that they might need for success. And now their high school, especially since it's closed, they'll be referring even more people to our site. So that's a pretty exciting thing when you're talking about how do we really make the impact. And if kids can say, you know what, my family might not be willing to go to a food pantry that's in the community because maybe they know a volunteer there, or maybe they know this or that. But if they can put a couple cans in their backpack, or bring, a couple small things of milk home to their sibling or for them or whatever it is, I mean, all of that makes a difference. And so as we go, we're also trying to collect as much data as we possibly can, because that helps us get the money to come in to make sure all these other things happen too, right? So but I have really loved the people that are leading these pantry efforts. It takes a lot and they're amazing. And I'm so happy that we're able to help them. And I hope that this all continues. And I think it's just kind of the beginning of some of the long-term work that we do together. Share tables. That's something that Pinckney kind of started when we first got Mission Nutrition off the ground. They're not doing it right now, but a share table is essentially when a kid has their own lunch, either from the school cafeteria or they bring it from home or something like that, and they may not eat all of it. Maybe they're too full, something like that. Maybe they had that orange and they had another orange earlier, so they don't necessarily need it for lunch, but they would like to share it. That's where Pinckney came to think, well, if we have a location where kids can share the food that they brought or the food that they have and they're not going to eat it, then maybe the next kid can have it. And the cool thing is, again, getting back to that stigma piece, if a kid puts an item on the table, they're just putting it on the table because they want to share. It could be that wrestler or the football player or whomever, that soccer player, or that really smart kid just went through all their food and they were still hungry, because that happens when you're a kid, and they go up to the table and take it. And because of that, because of having this kind of opportunity where any kid can grab what they might need, it means that you aren't necessarily identified as a kid that is food insecure when you walk up. And that can change and make all the difference, because if you're afraid of getting picked on, or if you're afraid of kids knowing that your family is struggling, that's a huge thing to overcome. But when you have a program like that, that's so simple, right? It's just such a simple solution. But when you have a program like that, it can really help the kids that do need it. Again, put it in your backpack, bring it home, whatever, right? Kids don't judge then. They don't know what you're doing with it, and they don't necessarily care either, right? School snacks, that was a really big push at the very beginning of this. We started to do some snack drives around just helping teachers maintain attention in the classroom. Again, getting to that piece of, if you don't eat breakfast, you're not catching on right away. It takes a while to get in the swing of things. That's kind of that idea. So we started some snack programs, and we're helping some of the schools pay for snacks, that kind of thing, through special grants and that effort. So Three Fires Elementary, that's where we really got started with our Mission Nutrition Livingston work. But again, we've done some things in Pinckney. We have kind of this broad idea of where can we start, at least if we're getting people to think about it, if we're getting administrative staff to think about it, or teachers to think about it, it kind of creates a different dynamic in the classroom, and maybe a more trusting piece, especially when teachers are overburdened already. Maybe they can click with a kid like, okay, I'm having a really tough day with this kid, but I think I'm seeing this sign, and this sign that says they might be hungry. Let me try to give them this snack and see if it helps. That's a huge deal, just to be able to identify something like that. So that's kind of some of our goals too, is again, that nutrition education, not from just the kids, not just for the parents, but also for the teachers and the staff, to say, okay, it might not be a convenient thing to have people in the classroom eating. Is there a way that we can do it that still gets you the answer that you need, right? Or the help that you need in getting that kid to pay attention or stop distracting his fellow students, or any of those sorts of things. So anyway, again, I could talk about this for a very long time, but Three Fires is where we really officially got started, because that's where we invested the money. Livingston County United Way provided a grant for us to get that kicked off the ground, and Gleaners actually matched the money to get the mobile going. And then again, that laid the groundwork to continue through our COVID response. They also celebrated National School Breakfast Week last year, which increased participation in breakfast, again, getting to that behavioral piece. That was the really exciting piece. Really unfortunate because we wanted to gather some data before, so that we could take it to other schools and say, hey, this worked, yay, that kind of thing. But unfortunately, COVID happened so quickly that we weren't able to have any of that long lasting line to show, hey, this is a big deal. But during that week, they had a lot of students participate. I think they had a different teacher of the day or something like that sit with their kids. And then the following week, kids continued to use the breakfast program. And that was kind of what we were hoping for. What we want to do is build a parent-student advisory committee. So it's not just us saying, okay, this is what we think you need. It's important that we have our brains thinking through everything. But if we don't have parent support or they don't know what we're doing, it really doesn't matter long term. So that's kind of one of our next steps. I will say that that's very likely after COVID, or at least further on where there's some consistency and there's some certainty, especially around, are you going to be in the classroom or are you not? But that's something that we're looking forward to making happen. As far as the rest of the mission nutrition work that we've done, we've already prepared materials that encourages healthy eating at the various levels. So elementary, middle, high school, each react differently to different posters or different messages that are sent out the door. So we've already kind of created that material. Right now, it's just saying, it was a little late to get off the ground and the school year is kind of all up in the air. But when we get back to some consistency again, having something visual either in the classroom or in the hallway where kids start to identify and think, hey, that's pretty cool. That was our goal. We did prepare district information that would share the resources available to families across the area. And those were created for last school year. They were used last school year, especially by social workers, and they were provided to parents and families through packets that went out to share with, whatever, with school information, that sort of thing. But this year they were huge for our efforts that happened across the board for all of our students. We ended up adding all those mobile distributions that I told you about. We added them to the food resource sheet, and then each school district got that information out to the families that are in need, and a lot of families ended up using it. So that was something that we started as like a, hey, it would be nice, and became a really important detail in our COVID work. It's always nice when some of the work is done. So that was a huge piece, and we will and are continuing to make sure all of that stuff is updated and available. And I can't wait to really get into the nitty-gritty with encouraging that healthy eating habits for all the different levels and getting kids involved. And there's just so much fun stuff that we can do going forward. I think aside from that, I didn't add it to this slide, but we do want to do something for National School Breakfast Week, which happens in March again. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but there are a lot of different opportunities to kind of tackle the idea, like, hey, make sure you have a nutrition bar when you walk into this, or before you walk into the school, something like that. And then, our great partner, again, United Dairy Industry of Michigan, they are willing to support some of this work because they know that first, it's necessary, but second, there are a lot of ways that we can learn from the Livingston community and then share it more broadly. So that's really a lot of what we're trying to accomplish too. We don't want to just make a program, right? That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make lasting impact. We also want to learn, what does that really mean? What does it mean when you start helping a kid in first grade that has some generational poverty issues, or has some parents with really severe health problems that they're just trying to make things work? So they're putting all their resources together. What does that do at the end of their high school career? And that's long term, but that's really what we want to find out. If we provide them the food that they need, what can it lead to? how can they help, or how do they become helpers in the community? How do they maybe they get help once and they remember it because, mom really just didn't know where else to go, and they remember, oh, she went to Gleaners that one time. Do they end up giving back? I don't know that we can find that information, but all those sorts of things create really good communities. And so that's what we want to learn. This, I won't go into super detail because I know we're starting to get down on the time, and here I was nervous about making up the whole time. But again, prior to COVID, we had all those programs that you see on the left, and to the right, this was really the impact that we had. I went through a lot of that already, but we definitely had school districts that kept their programs going, which was great because it led us to focusing on the areas with those larger gaps. And we could work with the school district and say, okay, so if you have these kids, they need these food packages. Are they also getting the other foods that they need? If they're not, can you refer them over here? All those fun sorts of things that happen. At the peak of all of this work, when every single mobile was going bi-weekly and all that sort of thing. Again, some of that's changed since, but when that was all happening, we were serving approximately 1,000 families every month. So that's just the families that we captured, but many families had, 2 to 3 kids in each household getting the help that they needed. So we don't know what the full impact was of having that food available, but we know it was huge. Salvation Army, they're part of this Mission Nutrition program because of the amazing work that they do. They served a record-breaking 2,240 kids this year. And then groceries on top of it. Like I said, they provided those groceries. That's enormous. That's a huge win. I think that they had up to 300 kids show up to certain sites, and they had high numbers basically the whole time. So I'm just, a lot of pride. I'm probably oozing too much pride, but I have a lot of pride in both what Gleaners did, but also just what our community was able to come forward and make happen. Obviously, we continue our mission nutrition work, and all the schools in Livingston County at this point, they're in full SFSP programming, so all kids can get the free breakfast and the free lunch. And now is the time for us to learn, what does that really mean when every kid gets what they need? And how does it make a difference going forward? How does it make a difference with stigma? What's going to happen next? All those sorts of things. So anyway, so that was kind of along the lines of our COVID response. Here was something that we did again at the very beginning of our whole work with Mission Nutrition Livingston. We wanted to say, okay, so we know that there's a need. Where might this need be? You can kind of tell the different colors identify, okay, here's kids that are eligible for those qualifying programs. Now, again, this is just those that qualify. We're not even talking about the ones that don't, which is really a large focus of ours because we know that that gap is real and families don't always raise their hand to say, hey, I could use that. But you can see here, these are people that do qualify for those programs. And you can see that the different colors, those darker colors, mean that there's a higher amount of need in that area. And we don't have necessarily schools there, right? But if they have a significant need, we need to see, how do we make sure that they get what they need? Is that a food desert sort of thing? Do we need to have a mobile in that area? Do we just need to get information up there? Are they well taken care of and we don't need to do anything? It's all those sorts of things that we've been looking into, and Mission Nutrition Livingston has really put a significant amount of time and effort into it. And I can only imagine it will continue with the numbers going up from COVID like they are. So I'd love to take now, if people have questions, I'd love to hear them. I don't need to continue to ramble, but that was kind of the conclusion of my presentation. I hope you see that there's not just we're doing work, but there's areas for you to participate too. And if you have a gap that you're saying, hey, families over here need your help, you're missing this, or this service could really be expanded, or we need more particular item out in the community, anything like that, that's stuff that we want to hear and hopefully address if we can, and maybe have your partnership or your help going forward.
Okay, I think I can change the settings so that people can unmute if they want to unmute themselves. So I'll change that in case that comes up.
Okay.
And I'll also post some stuff in the chat, a little survey you can do when you get a chance.
Sure.
People can feel free to put any questions in the chat or unmute themselves and share any questions they have. And also as a reminder, this program, it has been recorded. So in about a week, it might be a little quicker than that. It'll be up on our YouTube channel. And you'll get a follow-up email with that, our channel link, so you can watch it again in case you missed any of it or want to rewatch some of the information. So that'll be up there.
And please reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Obviously, like I said, I can talk for a long time. So I always appreciate the discussion that can come with it. I should have some trivia facts or something like that. Or do a special, like, hey, do you know you can win like a prize winning sort of thing. But I'm guessing everybody's tired from me going through all that detail.
Yeah, if no one has any questions, we can always wrap up. And then in the follow-up email, I can share like the link to the Gleaners website and any other, useful information. So you'll have that at your disposal.
That sounds great. Yeah, on our if you do share our Gleaners website, I do want to mention, just in case somebody happens to come across this presentation and is someone in need, we actually do have a tab. If you go to the top of our page, it says Get Help, and you can go immediately to find a map, and then you can find your closest resource. And especially right now with those mobiles and all those other things going on, they're on that map. And so I really encourage people to use that, or go to the Livingston County Hunger Council website. You can Google it. And there's a list of Livingston County specific locations that can help too. We're all about making sure people know what the resources are in this community.
Yeah, that's great. So I'll share that, how to get to that tab too in the email so people can use that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Bridget, for sharing about Mission Nutrition Livingston with us. And thank you all for attending tonight's program. There's a link to our event evaluation in the chat, and I'll also send that again in the email in case you miss it. So if you could take a few minutes to give us your feedback on tonight's program and share any other, programs you would like to see from us, any changes you have in mind. And you can visit our website, www.howelllibrary.org, to discover, the upcoming events from Howell Carnegie District Library. So I hope everyone has a good night and the rest of their week.
Thanks so much, everyone. Appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Thank you.